So before you buy, we've always talked about the value of having an inspector inspect the home. But here are 7 items that an inspector or an agent may not address. Not that they're bad people or they don't bring a tremendous amount of value to the transaction, but you need to make sure these items are addressed because they're critical to making a good decision whether or not to buy a new home or not. Again, largest investment you're probably ever going to have to make. And you know, our company's done tens of thousands of transactions, so we've seen it all. And these are 7 items that we recommend you take a look at before you make a decision to buy a house. So the first one is the HVAC ductwork. You know, you need to make sure, you know, it's here in Seattle, that this market, you know, we're known for mold, and mold can cause many chronic issues and be a long-term issue for you if you're not careful from the beginning of whether or not the house is actually going to be free of mold. And you can't just do that by looking at the fact that it functions, the fact that it cools or it heats, and that there's air coming out of the ducts. That's one part of it. The other part of it is it sized correctly? You know, a lot of HVAC systems are put in without regard to sizing, and you hear this a lot if you have ever bought an HVAC system, to make sure the unit is sized correctly for the home. And it's really simple. You just have to reach down, open up one of the vents, and look into it. Take a flashlight, you know, look down in there, reach down in there, and then you can do that yourself, or you can also have the inspector look inside the air handling system to make sure there's no mold. But before you buy it, you know, you really need to understand what you're getting into, because you don't want to have to replace the entire system. Number 2 is inspect on a rainy day. Seems like a no-brainer. Seems like it shouldn't be hard here in Seattle, but there are times where it does not rain, and it's always best to go on an inspection or view the house when it's raining. Why? You want to know where the water flows. You want to know, you know, obviously if the roof leaks, that's easy. You know, if you're up in the attic and you see, you know, water intrusion, but really you're looking to see the downspouts and where the water is flowing on the property, whether or not it's flowing from another adjacent property or where. You want to make sure you understand, you know, how water flows, because if it's not flowing correctly, it's hugely expensive to have your property regraded or the water flow issues addressed after you purchase. Number 3 is, you know, obviously you're going to know whether or not it's in a flood zone or not. But with today's extreme weather, you need to look at the larger picture of other zones around you to see if it could possibly ever flood. And it's important to make sure that you're not in a flood zone, of course, but you know, look and see what the history is of that area and how close you are, because you know, the extreme weather we're having, you never know, you could get a flood. And you know, flood insurance is extremely inexpensive if you're not in a flood zone. But it's always good to have, and it's something to review prior to buying, just to make sure you know where your property sits in regards to floodplains. And then number 4 is the sales history. It's easy enough to see the previous person who bought it, how much they bought it for, and how long ago they bought it. But we use PropStream. It's a great tool to use to really look at the long-term history of the property, to see what's been the history of that property in terms of price, how long people have lived in it, and then maybe there's a pattern there that you may discover. And it could be a pattern of every 3 years the home's being sold, and maybe it's being sold at list or maybe a little even below, believe it or not. And there's got to be a reason for that. And we discovered on one home that we had recently that we discovered was an issue, was that there was a train track. You know, here in Pierce County, there's a lot of trains, a lot of train tracks. And, you know, if you're not familiar with the area, some of the tracks are hidden. And if you just view the property, it's a great home. There's nothing wrong with the home. But if there's a hidden train track or a hidden noise issue, you know, that's going to be revealed through the history search. And then item number 5 is you want to visit, you know, you want to go there at different times of the day, different days of the week to check out the neighborhood. Is it a party neighborhood? Is the person next to you having parties every Friday? A person behind you? There's there dogs issues, pet issues? You never know. Just viewing the neighborhood different times gives you a real feel for the community. And using a local agent that lives in the community is the best. But without that, then you need to go visit it different times of the day, different times of the week, and looking at the traffic flow as well. Getting in and out of the place. You may visit it in the Sunday afternoon, but Monday morning at 8 when you're trying to get out, it may be a different story. So make sure you take the time to view the neighborhood at different times and days of the week. And then along with that, number 6 is interview the neighbors. Ask them about the traffic flows. Ask them about other neighbors. Just you walking up and engaging them is going to endear you to the community because they're going to want good neighbors, right? And you're going to want good neighbors. So they're going to answer your questions. Just tell them, make sure you ask the right questions. Just not how you doing, having a great day, I'm looking forward to living here. Ask them, hey, I'm really making a really important decision here. And just like you, what would have liked to have known before you moved in? And they'll reveal, a few things maybe about the HOA, about the commute time, the community in general. It's just really good practice to interview neighbors, walk the neighborhood, get to know your neighbors before you move in. You may find out that you're replacing a neighbor that they were looking forward to having them replaced, and they're going to go, hey, great, we're so glad to have somebody in that house that's either going to take care of it or not be a nuisance. All that is revealed if you interview the neighbors, and a local agent's going to tell you all about the neighbors. But without a local agent, you're going to have to do that yourself and just get out there and make sure you understand the community you're getting into. Number 7 is just researching that HOA. Not that there's an HOA and what it offers or doesn't offer and how much it is a month. You also want to look at the details, their budget, their financials, to see what their reserves are like, the history of the HOA, how long has the HOA been there, but who's been managing the HOA, and who is on the board. And as much information as you can about HOAs is important to get because they're notorious. And you want to make sure you're understanding that HOA. It's something you can ask your neighbors, obviously, but you need to do your due diligence with the HOA. With a local agent that lives in the HOA, they're going to tell you everything you need to know about that HOA. But without that local agent, you're going to have to do your due diligence and find out yourself. But all those are important, very important steps to make sure that you follow before you buy, and you'll be better off for it.